Welcome to our deep dive into the world of India Stack.
It's a really fascinating story about how India is using technology to kind of tackle some huge challenges.
And the ripple effects are reaching far beyond just India's borders.
Yeah, and we have a ton of information here, articles, research reports, all sorts of things.
Ready to uncover the most intriguing parts.
Exactly.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about building what they call a digital public infrastructure.
Yeah, like a system that's designed to be as accessible as a highway,
Publicly funded.
open for anyone to use,
Yeah.
and incredibly inclusive.
I mean, think about it. We're talking about a country where not so long ago, millions of people lacked even basic identification.
Right.
Now they have this digital ID called Aadhaar linked to their fingerprints and iris scans. It's like having a digital fingerprint that unlocks access to banking, government services.
Even proving you got your COVID vaccine.
Yeah, so it's really the foundation upon which India is building a more inclusive economy.
Aadhaar has brought hundreds of millions of people into the formal economy, giving them access to services they never had before.
It's a pretty remarkable story. So let's start with Aadhaar. What's the story behind this digital ID and how does it actually work?
So Aadhaar is a 12-digit unique ID number, and it's given to every resident in India.
Resident.
Every resident, and it's linked to their biometrics, their fingerprints, and iris scans,
Yeah.
making it incredibly secure and almost impossible to fake.
Wow, India has a massive population. How did they manage to enroll over 1 billion people in this system?
Well, that's the fascinating part. They designed it for scale and inclusivity from the very beginning.
Okay.
At its peak, they were enrolling 1.5 million people daily,
Wow.
and at a cost of less than $1 per person.
That's remarkable, but I'm sure collecting biometric data on such a large scale raises some eyebrows.
What about the privacy concerns?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Privacy is a major consideration with any digital ID system.
Sure.
There have been debates and legal challenges surrounding Aadhaar.
And in fact, India's Supreme Court declared the right to privacy a fundamental right in 2018.
Okay, so how do they balance the need for identification with protecting individual privacy?
So the Supreme Court ruling put some limits on how Aadhaar could be used. For instance, it's not mandatory for things like getting a mobile phone connection or a bank account.
Okay.
But what if someone tried to hack the system?
That would be a disaster.
Yeah, what kind of safeguards do they have in place?
What are they doing to protect people?
So they've implemented several layers of security, for starters. Aadhaar cards themselves only display the last 4 digits of the number. Everything else is masked.
Okay.
They also have this Aadhaar app, which lets people carry a digital copy of their Aadhaar card on their phone. And it's just as valid as the physical card.
Okay, so that's convenient. No more bulky wallets.
Right.
But what about data being shared with various organizations? How do they prevent that from getting out of control?
That's where tokenization comes in. So instead of sharing your actual Aadhaar number, you use a temporary revocable token. It's like a secret code that's unique to that specific transaction.
So it's like having a different key for each door.
Exactly. So no one can track your movements across different platforms
Yeah.
just using your Aadhaar number.
So more privacy and control over your data. It sounds like India is taking a very proactive approach to this whole idea of digital identity.
They are.
But I get the feeling that Aadhaar is just the beginning, right?
Yeah.
It's part of a much larger digital ecosystem.
You're spot on. Aadhaar is the foundation. But the real potential unfolds when you connect it with other elements of India Stack, like DigiLocker and UPI.
DigiLocker, now that sounds interesting. What's that all about?
So imagine a digital vault for all your important documents, your driver's license, academic certificates, even your vaccination records. That's DigiLocker.
Okay.
You can access these documents directly from the issuing authorities, so they're always up to date and accurate.
So no more shuffling through stacks of paper. Everything's neatly organized and secure online.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you can even share these documents securely with banks, employers, anyone who needs them. No more photocopying or physically handing over documents.
That sounds incredibly efficient. Is anyone actually using it in the real world, though?
Absolutely. In fact, you might have even encountered it without realizing it. Ever heard of Digiatra?
Digiatra, it rings a bell. Something to do with travel?
Yes. It's a system they use at airports across India. You can use DigiLocker to verify your identity in travel documents.
Oh, okay.
Which means you can breeze through security checkpoints much faster.
No more long queues at the airport. Sign me up.
Exactly.
It sounds like India is trying to really flip the script on how we think about data. It's not just about big companies collecting our information. It's about individuals having control and using it to their advantage.
That's the essence of DPIA, a data empowerment and protection architecture.
Okay.
India is taking a very different approach compared to, say, Silicon Valley.
Right.
They're putting individuals in control of their own data rather than letting big tech companies profit from it.
It's a pretty radical shift in thinking. But how does DPay actually work in practice?
Think of it as a set of rules that govern how data is collected, stored, and shared.
Okay.
First and foremost, consent is key. You have to give your explicit permission before anyone can access your data.
So no more sneaky data collection happening behind your back.
Right. And they also believe in data minimization, which means only collecting the absolute minimum amount of data needed for a specific purpose.
That makes sense. But if everyone is guarding their own data, how does that work when you need to share information, like if you're applying for a loan or a job?
That's where account aggregators come into play. They act as trusted intermediaries, making sure data is shared securely and only with your consent.
So let's say I need a loan. Instead of digging through file cabinets, I can use an account aggregator to gather my financial information from different sources and share it securely with the lender.
Exactly. You're in the driver's seat deciding what data to share and with whom.
It's like having a personal data assistant who works for you, not for some big corporation.
Exactly.
This is really making me rethink how data can be used in a positive way. But India's digital revolution goes beyond just identity and data management, right?
Absolutely. They're also leading the way in digital payments with a system called UPI.
UPI. I've heard that term. What makes it so special?
Imagine transferring money instantly using your mobile phone.
Okay.
That's UPI. It connects all the banks in India, allowing for seamless, real-time transactions.
So no more cash or checks, just tap and pay with your phone. It sounds similar to things like Venmo or Apple Pay.
The concept might be familiar, but UPI goes further. It's built on open protocol, so any bank can plug into the system.
Okay.
You're not locked into a specific company's platform.
So true interoperability, everyone can play in the same sandbox.
Exactly.
But is it actually catching on? Are people using it?
It's more than catching on. In February 2023 alone, there were over 7.5 billion transactions made using UPI,
Wow.
surpassing even Visa in terms of volume.
That's mind-blowing what's driving this incredible adoption.
A few things came together at the right time. The government actively promoted digital payments, and they made UPI transactions free.
Free transactions. No wonder people are jumping on board. But was it only the cost?
Not at all. The affordability of smartphones and data plans also played a huge role. Think about it. A few years ago, mobile data was a luxury in many parts of India.
Right.
Then Reliance Jio came along and shook things up with their incredibly cheap 4G network.
Right.
Suddenly, everyone was online streaming videos and, of course, using UPI.
It sounds like UPI wasn't just about technology. It was about changing the whole ecosystem. What's the impact been like on people's lives?
It's been transformative. Millions of people who previously relied on cash transactions are now part of the formal financial system. They can open bank accounts, access credit, and participate more fully in the economy.
That's incredible. It's amazing how a digital payment system can have such a profound impact on people's lives.
It is.
But before we move on, I'm curious, if transactions are free, how does UPI make money? Who's footing the bill?
That's the billion-dollar question. Unlike highways that generate revenue through tolls, UPI doesn't have a direct revenue stream. It's sparked a lot of debate about its long-term sustainability.
So is it operating at a loss?
Not necessarily. There's a strong argument that the benefits outweigh the costs. UPI reduces the cost of handling cash, promotes financial inclusion, and boosts economic growth.
Okay.
It's a classic case of short-term costs potentially leading to long-term gains.
I can see how that would be a tough call. Are there any concerns about competition, especially with companies like Visa and MasterCard?
Absolutely. Some argue that by making UPI transactions free, the government is giving it an unfair advantage over established players who rely on transaction fees. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It seems like UPI has definitely shaken things up in the world of finance. It's a model other countries are watching closely.
It's a bold experiment, and it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out in the long run.
And I have a feeling this is just one chapter in India's digital story. What other innovations are they cooking up?
Well, if you're curious about how India is shaking up e-commerce, we need to talk about ONDC.
ONDC.
Yeah.
That's a new one for me. What is it all about?
ONDC stands for Open Network for Digital Commerce. It's like building a brand new highway system, but for online buying and selling.
Oh,
You see, right now, e-commerce is dominated by giants like Amazon.
right.
They control the marketplace, the rules, everything.
So ONDC is about breaking up those monopolies and giving smaller businesses a fighting chance.
Exactly. Imagine a world where you're not limited to just one platform.
Okay.
You could shop from any seller, regardless of which app or website they use. ONDC connects them all, creating a much more level playing field.
That sounds pretty revolutionary. Are people excited about it?
Definitely, even prominent business leaders like Anand Mahindra are on board. He tweeted that ONDC could spark a world-beating retail revolution and empower millions of small shop owners across India.
That's a pretty bold statement, but I imagine building something this ambitious comes with its own set of challenges.
Of course, e-commerce is complex.
Mm.
There are logistics and regulations to navigate.
Yeah.
Plus, they're going head-to-head with some of the biggest companies on the planet. It's a David versus Goliath situation.
So, what are some of the key things they need to tackle to make ONDC a success?
One of the biggest hurdles is language.
Right.
India has incredible linguistic diversity, and not everyone is comfortable transacting in English.
Sure.
They've launched this platform called Pashini to address this.
Okay.
It uses AI-powered language translation to make digital services available in 22 Indian languages.
Wow, that's a huge step towards making e-commerce accessible to everyone, regardless of which language they speak. It sounds like inclusivity is woven into the very fabric of India's stack.
The core principle, they want to create a digital economy that works for everyone, not just a select few.
Yeah, it's about empowering individuals and communities.
Exactly.
Speaking of empowerment, let's talk about access to credit. It's a major issue in many parts of the world, especially for those who are traditionally excluded from the formal financial system.
You're right, and that's where OCEN comes in, the Open Credit Enablement Network. It's designed to revolutionize how people access credit, especially those who might not have collateral or a traditional credit history.
So we're talking about small business owners, street vendors, people who often struggle to get loans from traditional banks.
Exactly.
How does OCEN help them?
Think back to our conversation about UPI and how it's creating these digital trails of people's financial activities.
Okay.
OCEN taps into this data to assess creditworthiness.
Got it.
It's like a digital reputation that proves you're reliable.
So instead of relying solely on physical assets, they're looking at your actual financial behavior, your track record.
Precisely. This opens up a whole new world of possibilities for people who were previously shut out of the credit system.
Can you give me a real-world example of how this might work?
Imagine a vegetable vendor who relies on a small loan each morning to buy produce.
Okay.
They pay it back every evening, but the interest rates are sky high. They're trapped in a cycle of debt.
I can see how that would be incredibly difficult to break free from.
Now imagine this vendor using their UPI transaction history, which shows a consistent pattern of borrowing and repaying to prove their creditworthiness to formal lenders. They can finally access loans at reasonable rates, breaking free from that vicious cycle.
It sounds like OSIM could be a game changer for so many people. It's taking something that was once a barrier, a lack of collateral, and turning it into an asset proof of responsible financial behavior.
It's a powerful example of how data can be used to level the playing field and create a more inclusive financial system.
But OSIN goes beyond just financial data, doesn't it? It's about using data to empower individuals in all sorts of ways.
You're absolutely right. Remember the account aggregators we talked about?
Yeah.
They can facilitate the sharing of other types of data as well, all with your consent. Of course, think of it as a digital portfolio that you control.
Give me an example. How could someone use this in their own life?
Let's say you're a writer looking for a new job. You could use an account aggregator to share verified data from your previous employers, maybe even records of your published articles. It's a way to showcase your skills and experience in a way that's secure and trustworthy.
It's like having a digital resume that's always up to date and verifiable, no more relying on references or digging through old files.
Exactly. It's about putting you in control of your own narrative and using data to your advantage.
It's clear that India is at the forefront of this digital revolution, but are they keeping all of this innovation to themselves or sharing their knowledge with the rest of the world?
They're actually quite generous in sharing their expertise. They've been working with other countries, especially in the global south, to help them build their own digital public infrastructure. They've developed this open source platform called MOSIP, Modular Open Source Identity Platform, which is basically a blueprint for building a digital ID system. Countries can adapt it to their own specific needs.
So they're not just giving away the fish, they're teaching people how to fish.
Exactly. It's about empowering other nations to create their own digital success stories. Countries like the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Morocco, and Ethiopia are all in various stages of implementing MOSIP.
Wow.
And UPI is gaining traction globally as well. India has linked UPI with Singapore's PayNow system, enabling seamless cross-border payments between the two countries.
So I could use my UPI app to pay someone in Singapore.
You could?
That's amazing.
It is, and they've signed agreements with several other countries, including Bhutan, Nepal, UAE, France, Malaysia, and the UK, to adopt UPI.
It sounds like India is becoming a global leader in this space, setting an example for others to follow. But are these other countries implementing these systems in exactly the same way as India?
That's a great question. While they might borrow the basic principles, they're also adapting them to their own context. For example, Brazil has a system called Pix, which is similar to UPI, but charges merchants a small fee for transactions.
So they've found a way to make it financially sustainable while still keeping it accessible for users. It sounds like there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Each country needs to find its own path.
Absolutely. But the key takeaway here is that digital public infrastructure can be a powerful tool for social and economic development, no matter where you are in the world.
It's inspiring to see how technology can be a force for good, creating a more inclusive and equitable world.
It really is. And what's so fascinating to me is that this model is gaining momentum. Like, countries around the world are looking to India for inspiration.
It's really remarkable.
It's proof that technology, when designed with inclusivity in mind, can really change the world for the better.
So what does this all mean for us? For the average person, India has built this incredible digital infrastructure, and it's already having a real impact on people's lives. It's a bold experiment, and it makes you question the role of technology in building a more equitable society.
Yeah, it's challenging us to rethink traditional approaches to development and governance. In a way, India is showing us that you don't need to follow Silicon Valley's playbook or rely on big tech to drive innovation.
It's about governments taking the reins, shaping the digital landscape, and using technology to benefit all citizens.
And that message seems to be resonating globally. There's a growing awareness that digital public infrastructure could hold the key to solving some of the world's toughest challenges.
If India can achieve this, what's possible in other parts of the world, it really opens up your imagination to what could be achieved. What other problems could we solve if we embrace the power of digital public infrastructure?
That's the exciting part. We're just scratching the surface. Imagine a world where everyone has access to affordable healthcare, quality education, and financial services, no matter their income or where they live.
A world where technology empowers individuals and creates opportunities instead of widening the gap between the haves and have-nots.
Exactly. It's a vision that India is helping to turn into reality.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey. We've learned so much about India Stack and its potential to transform not just India, but the entire world. It's something to watch closely, for sure.
Absolutely. The possibilities are truly endless. It all starts with imagination and a belief that we can use technology to build a better future for everyone.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of India Stack. We hope you'll join us again soon for another fascinating exploration of the ideas shaping our world.